So today we're going to be talking about the 2004 movie Shark Tale, which actually has multiple directors, including Bebo Bergeron, Vicky Jensen, and Rob Letterman. And this is a relatively star-studded cast with Will Smith and Angelina Jolie and Renee Zellweger and Robert De Niro, as well as Jack Black, and heck, you even have Katie Couric, and you definitely will notice what role she plays. I'll give you a hint. It's herself. Now, this is not. I wouldn't say this is a bad movie. I think some people out there probably give this movie a lot of flack for being rather pandering and really going for the puns. And there are a fair number of movie critics out there that cannot stand puns with a burning passion. And to that I say, I happen to love puns, and I felt that they went out of their way in many fun ways to really capture everything in terms of keeping the city feel that they were going for the entire time. Now, I don't know if it was as much as a hot off the press as this bottle might try to imply to you, but nonetheless, it was still pretty fun, and it was definitely worthwhile to enjoy wine to this one as well. I think the big difference between enjoying the wine now to this movie was that really the last time I actually sat down and watched this was when it came out, and I was 12 years old when that movie came out, so I wasn't exactly going to the bottle of wine to figure out how I felt about this movie, but maybe that's just me. That being said, the jokes weren't that hard to get, but at the same time, I didn't really cringe when I heard the vast majority of these. And sure, there were a few that I thought, really? Really? We're gonna go there? But I felt like a fair amount of them I actually did get a chuckle out of. I think my personal favorite was the Muscle Crow. Aside from the fact that you have the seafood pun with the muscle part. I'm just trying to imagine Russell Crowe actually having muscles and being a brawny man, and I think that made me laugh even more than what the movie makers were really intending. So, hidden benefits, I guess. That's hard to say. Anyway, this movie, it's a fairly common premise. You have this fish who's really wanting to move up in the world, and he feels that right now his life is in the dumps and things could be a lot better for him. In one regard, that's a fair assessment. Being poor, it sucks. It does. And when you haven't had money before, it's hard to really feel like that lifestyle could be hard or difficult, or that it would be fake or not as rewarding. But you also don't really feel like this main character, Oscar, played by Will Smith, is really that likable, and that's going to be the movie's biggest downfall. I think everything else would have really worked out just fine, except that this protagonist of Oscar, this blue and green fish, and we'll get to why I mentioned those colors soon. This blue and green fish with these crazy eyes, and I know that they were trying to humanize these characters, but some of them turned out better than others. Let's just put it that way. You don't really have a lot of respect for this character, though, of Oscar. You don't really feel like that you want to root for him. You feel he's kind of an ass, frankly. And I can't really put any reason as to why I wanted to see him succeed. Honestly, I wanted to see his best friend, as he kept saying throughout the movie, Angie, played by Renee Zellweger. I wanted to see her succeed because she was just too young and dumb in love to really know any better. But at least she had some sensibility about her, and she had some common sense, which it's funny how common sense isn't really that common anymore. Hard to believe. Anyway, the protagonist here isn't really that likable. He's a jerk all around. When he's given money, even by Angie, he blows it on what he thinks is a surefire bet, and of course, it's not. And I gotta be honest, if the bet was surefire, the movie would have stopped after about 15 minutes. And that's the thing here. You feel like that a lot of these stopping points in the movie, these different plot points, if you will, were really just made so that this movie could go on further and fit the time frame of your standard movie. It's not a bad movie. I liked it. I liked the puns. I liked the combination of the meshing of the mob feel and the hip hop feel that they were going for, as they mentioned in their special features. Anyway, I actually love both of those elements, but I could also feel the moments where the movie was dragging a bit and was just saying, "Ugh, will someone just take me to the finish line of this movie? I don't know what to do with myself anymore." I got that feeling quite a bit. But anyhow, the other character that I wasn't a big fan of was Sykes, his boss. He's a pufferfish, played by Martin Scorsese. Now, you may know his name from more director feels, and there's actually a movie that he directed that I'll be talking about soon enough called Shutter Island. But I digress. He he's a bit asinine. He owes money to the mob, but he's also the manager of this whale wash. He's the hard one to really figure out. Um, and he's the one that Will Smith's fish owes money to. And this is what I should mention too. Back to the blue and green fish. So Oscar, the fish Oscar, is a mixture of blue and green with some yellow and purple going on, and he wears his backwards cap and lets you know that he thinks he's a gangster, but gangster more like Ice Cube as opposed to Al Capone, and which both kinds of gangsters are in this movie. So yeah, you have to distinguish between them. That's fair, but he's this mix of all of these colors that are not black, but he has this line where he says something along the lines of, well, white fish just can't do it, and he's talking about how the blackfish know what's going on, and that joke would work a little better if we could actually see Will Smith's face. And yeah, you can do a quick Google search or IMDb search to figure out that Will Smith is in fact black, but in the vein of the movie, it doesn't really make sense for that joke to work. But that being said, some of the jokes didn't really, mesh well with what atmosphere they're going for. I thought, on the other hand, some of them really were quite funny. I think in particular, I liked how Sykes mapped out the entire food chain and how he had essentially the mob was up here. Sykes was number two because he was only this humble, this little bit, and then all these different things, and then whale droppings, and then Oscar at the very, very, very bottom of the scroll. I did laugh a little bit at that. That was fair. And then the movie goes on, and Oscar gets swept up into being the shark slayer because of a freak accident where the Don's son Frankie, the big shark that is gonna inherit the business, he gets killed by an anchor, and Frankie's brother Lenny, played by Jack Black, is a vegetarian shark. Which I gotta ask, how do you eat? Maybe that's a very judgmental question for me, but I'm thinking, you're a shark and you're vegetarian. And again, this comes back to the human theme. If these are a bunch of humans, as they're trying to represent in this oceanic world, it would make sense to have someone that was a vegetarian, you know, but you need the contrast of vegetarians to be with the meat eating sharks, but having a vegetarian shark makes me wonder what were you eating on beforehand? You know, I'd never even see him eat any actual veggies or greens or, you know, any other kind of cuisine that could make his life last as long as it has been already. Maybe I'm looking into this a little too much. I wouldn't do that on the other hand if this movie didn't ask me to do so. They mentioned more than a few times that Lenny is a vegetarian, and that just it just doesn't really jive that well. I guess it's just a point to move the story a little closer from A to B. But anyhow, um, Oscar is being tortured out in the middle of nowhere, and Lenny and Frankie, the sharks, happen to be out and about in that same area, which that's a major coincidence. And as Frankie is getting mad at Lenny for not just pouncing on the fish already, that's when he darts out and the anchor hits Frankie, and Lenny blames himself, but without really looking at what happened. And then there's this divide where Lenny doesn't really talk to Oscar that much, but he should have recognized him later on when they run into each other again, and Oscar has taken credit for the murder of Frankie, even though it was just an anchor, and that happens because these two jellyfish, uh, Sykes's I guess goons, were torturing him out in the middle of nowhere, and they see that the shark's been killed, and they think that Oscar did it, and so Oscar, of course, lies his way about it because that's all he's really done so far is lie about everything. But anyway, he he doesn't really do much of a job Oscar does. He works at this whale wash, but he's really not that engaged with the company. He doesn't even pretend like he has an ounce of care in his bones, in his body, whatever you want to say about it. He doesn't give a hoot at all. But he's still working there. His dad worked there for 25 years, and he tells Angie about how his dad was the number one tongue scrubber and how he got made fun of anyway, even after all that hard work. And so, what Oscar wants to do instead is to do no hard work and to just be somebody anyway. And while I understand the prospects of moving up in the world and having some more clout to your name, what I don't understand and I really can't respect as a result is just magically snapping your fingers and getting there. It doesn't really work that way. I wish it did. Trust me, I could snap my fingers right now and bada bing, you know, I'd be a somebody according to this movie's standards or desires. But I'm not. Maybe I'm a little bitter, but maybe I'm also a little realistic. I think it's probably 40-60, and you pick which way that goes. As for some of my favorite lines from this movie, because let's be real, I did have a few favorite lines. I really enjoy the character of Lola, who is played by Angelina Jolie, and she's this smoking hot fish that's got, you know, red, she's all red, and she has this line of, deep down, I'm really superficial, and I chuckle quite a bit as I'm chuckling now. I think my favorite part was just how blunt she was, and they had already just played the song called Gold Digger, and not the Kanye West one, but a song that Ludacris wrote for this movie. Go figure. Or, you know, he performed for this movie. It doesn't really matter. I didn't even know it existed until today, even though I love Luda. But deep down, I'm really superficial. And it kind of made me think, oh, I guess you have at least slightly more superficial knowledge about your superficiality. Maybe? I also like the line of raise the reef from the pufferfish Sykes. His his way of constantly trying to be cool and hip and with it. And maybe like 20% of the time he was, and then the other 80 he failed miserably. It was at least amusing to watch him try and fail most of the time, and occasionally get one that hit. And when it hit, it was a home run. So that was a plus for sure. And speaking of Sykes, I also liked the "Who's Your Puff Daddy?" And I will admit that's probably one that I would like more than most people that are actually reviewing this movie. I just like the fact that it went with the puffer and the puff daddy. I'm a sucker for puns, and even the bad puns can at least make a smile on my face, as opposed to jokes that aren't even jokes. I would rather have a bad pun than an anti-joke. Personal preference. The other thing about this movie was Jack Black's character of Lenny. He was the hard one to figure out. I mentioned before he was this vegetarian, but then he also has this like inner battle, if you could call it that, of wanting to be a dolphin and not really wanting to be a shark, and just dealing with his insecurities and desires to be a dolphin. Maybe for another movie. This felt like not just a subplot, but a subplot that could warrant its own movie and didn't really need to be explored too much. On the other hand, it did kind of tie into the aspect of how he wanted to be a different person than Oscar. Then Oscar wanted to be a different person as well. They both wanted to be different, in other words. Oscar wanted to be big and mighty, and Lenny was just content with being a vegetarian and being a dolphin and being graceful, whereas Oscar was wanting to be ruler and have everyone bow down to him. And even though I don't like Oscar as a protagonist, especially for the bulk of the movie, I did appreciate that they at least had him become reformed and at least learn to love Angie and at least have the lesson of, well, damn it, I don't need money to rule my life, to be the beckoning call of what I'm supposed to do. I at least like the fact that he at least wised up and ends up with Angie in the end. And I thought that was smart. I did like, on the other hand, how when he dumps Lola, the Angelina Jolie fish, he does get at least, the seaweed beaten out of him. There's me and my bad puns. and how Lola ends up ratting him out to the sharks and helping capture Angie. And then this big, I guess I would call it a pseudo climax, but I guess their supposed climax of having Angie being all tied up, and how Oscar is trying to play it up that he doesn't know her and that this is not a big deal at all, and that he's totally better than all of that. He doesn't need any of that. But of course he does, because as Angie tells him more about what's really going on and how Lola and Oscar interact, he starts to realize Lola's kind of a superficial bitch, even though she told him that from the get-go. He's not a smart guy, is what I'm getting at. And maybe back in guppy school, he should have picked up a lesson or two. And I don't care if a guppy is not a small version of a fish. I like the joke. So, Oscar does have at least the arc of, I learned not to be a jerk or as much of a jerk. Because let's be real, he's gonna have a little bit of a trace of jerk in his blood. That's kind of hard to really eradicate. I think the other kinds of lines that I enjoyed from this movie were really not as much lines, but just the environment that they did set up. And I may not have expressed this enough, but I did enjoy the environment they set up. They have, Coral Cola or Gup or News Reef or Pisces for a magazine. Okay. And the Kelpie cream. Okay. I had to laugh at that. That was kind of funny. Though I gotta be honest, what does kelp taste like? What does it taste like? It's probably a little fishy. But I digress. I feel bad that Frankie didn't really have more of an arc to him. He was just there to die, and for Lenny to mourn over, and for Don or Robert De Niro's dad shark to mourn over. I thought that was kind of, it was unfortunate. I wanted to see Frankie mature and actually learn something. But I also liked how the little shrimp that Lenny was ordered to eat, even though he didn't, came back in the end and just goofed around with 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 Don Nero. See, now I'm just in the mood to make bad puns, and because even though I love puns, I do admit most of these puns were pretty bad. But I enjoy bad puns, and not everyone does. So I think a lot of your enjoyment of this movie really depends on how flexible you are with the puns that come out from their mouths or their gills, whatever. I think the other thing to mention about this movie is that it came out right after Finding Nemo, but you know what? It was a fairly different storyline from Finding Nemo. I mean, sure, it had a lot of pop culture references. Surprise, but they fit, and I enjoyed the movie for a lot of different reasons when I first saw this in 2004 than I do now. Some of the puns I actually get now that I didn't get then, and that waits out with the jokes that were appealing to my 12-year-old self that weren't quite as appealing to my 24-year-old self. You live, you learn. As far as final thoughts of this movie, I don't think it's going to be life or death for your kids to watch. I think they're going to get quite a few laughs out of it. And yeah, I mean, this is one of the PG movies that you probably wouldn't let your 3-year-old watch, but your 8-year-old, that's fine. It doesn't really matter that much. And trust me, they probably learn a lot crazier things in school anyway. And I don't think this movie is going to expose them to anything. It's not anything over the top or anything that's so bad that it's awful in an unironic way. I think the big thing is that not to just follow the model of the hero in this movie or the supposed hero. I think it's important to make sure that you really emphasize that it's not about having the money, and thankfully he learns that in the end, but you also do want to be compassionate with the people around you that do love you for who you are as opposed to who you're not. And also the ones that are just trying to get you for your money. I think on the other hand, you don't need a movie to teach your children that, You should teach your children that. And if you're an adult who doesn't have kids and doesn't ever have the thought of having kids, cool. If you like this movie, you'll like this movie. I tend to like this movie. I will say out of the movies I've reviewed so far, it is on the bottom of my list. That being said, I haven't really started on my hunt for the runt yet, and I know for sure that the first movie I have seen for that is much, much, much lower than this movie would be. I would give this movie a B, to be honest with you. Um, I'm a little more generous with my grades than I think your standard reviewer would be. I'm a sucker for bad puns. I think that helps up it a half grade or so from like a B minus to a B. I also think that a lot of these things really come together and work just fine. I like the hip hop feel. I like the mob feel that they're going for. I think the character designs could have been a little better. A little. You didn't need to be too realistic because sometimes you don't need reality to really creep into every little crevice of your life. In other words, Will Smith was freaky as hell. His fish was, anyway. I think he did just fine with his lines. I just don't think that they were the best of lines. And the hero was a bit of a downer. It's unfortunate. I like the other characters, though. I thought they did a superb job. And I gotta talk about the jellyfish for a hot second. Played by Ziggy Marley, related to Bob Marley, and Dougie Doug. Sanka, you dead man? I love Cool Runnings too much. Whether or not that's really the real story, don't argue it here. You can have that in your own time. But Cool Runnings a movie and Dougie Doug and being Sanka, whatever. It's superb. They're hysterical in this movie. They make me laugh so much. They are quite enjoyable and entertaining, and they make this movie much more fun to watch, with or without wine. I was just in the mood to crack open a bottle of wine that said hot off the press. So there you go. But I would say I probably would watch this movie. I certainly wouldn't, go back and rewatch it over and over again. I hadn't seen this movie in quite a long time, to be honest with you. But I would say that it's at least worth a watch. You probably don't need to go to the theater, and in fact, you're not going to because it's been 12 years since it came out in theaters. But I would say it's worth a download. But you don't need to exactly own it in your collection. I would say it's worth a rent or so, and maybe include a bottle of wine if you're really not in the mood for the puns. If you're not a big fan of those, I probably would get a little drink or two. But I think you could still enjoy it without. So that's my take on Shark Tale. In other words, a fun movie that doesn't need any accompaniment, but you are more than welcome to do so. All right, so this was a fairly fun and easy movie on the eyes to watch, and I had a lot of enjoyment coming from this movie and reviewing it. And so I hope you all have a great day now. All right, I'll come back to y'all soon enough with my next review, and I haven't decided which one I'll do yet, but I have a few different lists that I tend to run through nowadays. So I'll talk to y'all later. All right, bye.